Hey guys, today we have a look at one of the most popular meditation practices in the Western world, namely loving kindness or simply metta. While metta is immensely popular nowadays, it has changed to quite a considerable extent compared to the original times of the Buddha. Today we try to find out what metta really was when the Buddha taught it and how it is different from today. But first, we have to understand a bit of context surrounding metta meditation. Metta in itself is one of the four great emotions that the Buddha described as worthy or worth having. The other three are compassion, appreciative joy, and equanimity. It is important to notice that emotions and feelings are not the same in Buddhism, and it's kind of crucial to tell them apart from each other. Feelings are very primal and describe just the, judgment of the experience as good, bad, or neither good nor bad. Nothing else. The Buddha also called it Vedana, and we might call it the hedonic tone of our experience. Emotions, however, are quite different. They can be joy and are quite high-level phenomena. The point is, emotions also have a hedonic tone attached to them that we experience as either good, bad, or neutral. However, they are much more nuanced. If you would try to, map emotions to a Pali word, it would be more close to chitta, or mood, than it is to feeling. And with that out of the way, we can now point to another extremely important aspect of the four great emotions, and especially of metta. When the Buddha was asked to describe the four in detail, he almost always used negative formulations. Not negative in the sense that they were depressing, but he described them as the absence of something. While the Buddha often said metta, the word metta, he described metta by the absence of certain mental states. In the case of metta, the Buddha described it as the absence of gross types of aversion, namely ill will, that is mainly directed towards other people or towards ourselves. That is the main type of aversion that we experience as humans, and it is the most grossest type. The Buddha usually described the other three in similar terms, namely as non-cruelty, non-discontentment, and then non-aversion, or upekkha, as the last one, or equanimity. You could also phrase it like that. But before we continue, here is a small example of how the Buddha explained the four great emotions in the suttas. And he said things like, "Here, Brahmin, when I am dwelling in dependence on a village or a town, I enter upon a grove, I collect some grass and leaves that I find there into a pile and then sit down. Having folded my legs crosswise and straightened my body, I bring mindfulness to the fourth. Then I dwell pervading 1/4 of the mind, imbued with loving kindness, likewise the second, third, fourth, above, below, across, and everywhere, and to all as to myself. I dwell pervading the entire world with a mind imbued with loving kindness, vast, exalted, measureless, without enmity, without ill will. I dwell pervading 1/4 with a mind imbued with compassion, appreciative joy, equanimity, likewise the second, third, fourth, etc. Thus, above, below, across, everywhere, and to all as to myself, I dwell pervading the entire world with a mind imbued with equanimity, vast, exalted, measureless, without enmity, without ill will. And then, Brahman, when I am in such a state, if I walk back and forth, on that occasion my walking back and forth is divine. If I am standing on that occasion, my standing is divine. If I am sitting on that occasion, my sitting is divine. If I lie down on that occasion, that is my high and luxurious bed. This is a high and luxurious bed that I, at present, can gain and is gain without trouble or difficulty." So, as we can see, this is quite the statement. This describes the practice of metta quite well. And the feeling of it could be also described with a sutta snippet. Suppose there was a pond with clear, agreeable, and cool water, transparent, with smooth banks delightful. If a man, scorched and exhausted by hot weather, very parched and thirsty, came from the east or from the west or from the north or from the south, or from where you will, having come upon the pond, he would quench his thirst and his hot weather fever. So too, monks, if anyone from a clan of nobles goes forth from the home life into homelessness, and after encouraging the Dhamma and discipline proclaimed by the Tathagata, develops loving kindness, compassion, appreciative joy, and equanimity, and thereby gains internal peace, then, because of that, internal peace, he practices the way that is proper to the recluses, I say. And the interesting part here is, and I like to point that out quite often, the Buddha does not describe that type of practicing of jhana or brahmaviharas, it doesn't really matter for all that matters, as quenching your thirst, or getting rid of your hot weather fever, or finding a land of safety after being in danger, or getting rid of a terminal disease, or something like that. It doesn't really matter. You can think of the similes of the 5 hindrances as an example. The point is, it is always that something oppressive has been removed from you. It is no type of orgasmic joy or pleasure or anything like that when the Buddha describes it. There is a certain degree of pleasure in any of those states, no question about it, especially initially after attaining them. But after that, they get quite neutral. After you drank a lot of water when you have been thirsty, it's very neutral. You no longer feel thirsty, you no longer feel bad. But there's also no emotional high anymore that you found water. I mean, when you are about to die from thirst, then you will be very thrilled that you found an oasis or a pond in the desert, no question about it. But as you have been drinking as much as you wanted, well, it gets more and more neutral over time. And the same is true for all the other states. The more you progress along the brahmaviharas or jhanas, the more neutral they get. But the neutral feeling is the best feelings of them all, according to the Buddha, at least for someone who understands it. The neither good nor bad feeling is supreme. But before we come to the difference between modern metta and ancient metta, we must obviously also know what modern metta looks like. Well, there is a lot of diversity when it comes to the specifics. Basically, all modern metta techniques follow the same pattern. If you feel bad or something, sometimes at scheduled times, you do something in response to bad feelings, or you mechanically follow certain recipes. Typically, people follow a list of phrases or internal mantras, where they wish themselves or others to dispel the bad states of their mind. A typical sentence might be, "May I be happy," and then gradually expand that sentence to less likable characters until you arrive at your enemies, as an example. And if we now compare with the citation from the suttas, a very stark difference becomes apparent. The Buddha and his monks, seemingly at least, never recited any phrases or mantras. He simply advised us to scan our minds for ill will and abandon it by not following those evil impulses. He advised us to abandon hate by the opposite of hate, which is non-hate and not love, which you can also see in a citation from the Dhammapada, where he explicitly says that hate can only be conquered by non-hate and not by love, which is very important. Hate is an active attitude of the mind. It is something that we do with the mind, and we stop doing it by simply not following such an impulse. And the Buddha repeated the very same instruction for all the 4 brahmaviharas. If you practice them rightly, the circumstances can be the exact same. Yet there will not be any ill will towards others, no cruelty towards others, and even no discontentment with how things are. There would only be perfect neutral equanimity. And all brahmaviharas describe the absence of types of aversion, because brahmavihara practice means that you use your impulse of hate to weaken your craving. Metta just comes first, and the others are more subtle. If you do it rightly, there can be the worst things happening externally, and even horrible thoughts in your mind. But without any wish to get rid of those things, you are at perfect peace, no matter how the circumstances are. And this is why the liberation and the training that the Buddha described lead to the unconditioned, because what actually happens around you within the 5 aggregates does no longer matter to you. You are at ease. That is the goal. It is good to think of metta as an attitude of friendliness. Think of the difference between mean strangers and ill-behaved friends. The key here is that you want to recondition your own response to things and not replace the things themselves. You don't want to get rid of your friend's behavior. That is not what you want to do. You want to change your attitude, because that is where craving is. Craving is in your attitude towards things. The best friend can just be as rude as a stranger, yet you behave very differently in body, speech, and mind towards them. That attitude, that craving, is what we change. The Buddha described craving as lustful, hateful, and distracting or delusional intentions. The Buddha always described greed, hate, and distraction, and our misguided copes to change how we feel. We don't change the things in the world or replace how we feel. We simply change our own responses to all those external things. If we are very technical and accurate, metta is a method, you can call it like that, to weaken craving through the vehicle of non-hate. But for that to work, you must be a kind of hateful person. If you are more of a lustful person, then jhana practice is much better for you, because jhana means non-lust, while metta and all the Brahma Viharas are in fact non-hate. And as craving always comes as a bundle, it's an inseparable package of greed, aversion, and delusion, you can weaken craving through any of those. But you need that natural proclivity towards one of those things. And when you love someone very strongly, as an example, lustful intentions, you have at least the potential to hate just as strongly. Just imagine that the loved person stops doing the things that you deemed as agreeable. Suddenly you hate that person. If they, for example, meet another person that you disagree with or that you do not like, then all that lust would turn into hate just as quickly. And just imagine that loved person betraying you. That is excruciating for most people who are full of affection towards another person. However, if you weaken hate, you also weaken lust. Both are two sides of the same coin and follow each other. This is also why replacing hate with love cannot lead to Nibbana. It simply does not work, because you also strengthen the counterpart, which is very important. You strengthen the entire mechanism the other way around. And hate can turn into love and vice versa just as fast. And this is very important. And the experienced listener might have noticed the similarities with jhana practice by now. When the Buddha explained jhana, he always did so by starting with the sorrow and extreme weakening of sensuality, which is also called the lustful intentions. In this case, you weaken craving as a whole by weakening lust. And most people are lustful persons, at least nowadays. And the result, however, is the same as when you practice metta, namely equanimity, immovability of the mind, non-reactivity, being, let's say, immune to your own emotions, at least when perfected. And just like jhanas, Brahma Viharas are nice because of the freedom from hate and lust, and are always of an oppressive nature. That moves away, that is gone when you practice jhana and Brahma Vihara rightly. And freedom from that oppression in both ways means no longer being pulled and pushed around by your mind. You found a place of stability and peace, equanimity, upekkha. And one more important remark. Neither jhana nor metta or Brahma Vihara are special to Buddhism. Every person in the world can choose to go against their own impulses of greed, hate, and distraction. And the result will always be a kind of equanimity or peace if done long enough. Every religion in the world can do that. However, if left unchecked, the same tendencies will come back. And Buddhism and Dhamma are all about making it impossible for those states to re-arise. The Buddha even said that the uninstructed worldling may enter jhana or even may be reborn in the Brahma world. But he also criticized, for example, Sariputta for only teaching the Brahma Viharas and not the Dhamma, as an example in Majjhima Nikaya number 97. Only the right view on dependent origination, and this is the stuff that is special to the Buddhas, can actually fix the problem for good. Without that, the Buddha said that you could be free for up to 60,000 eons of world expansion and contraction on end, and then be reborn in hell. And you can think of a single eon as the universe expanding and then falling back on itself. So if you want to practice metta, or the metta that the Buddha taught, it is surprisingly simple to do. First, you need mindfulness and a broad context, because you would be immediately absorbed in any hateful intention otherwise. As soon as a person you dislike comes along, you would be full of hate towards that person. So you need a broader context. You need to bind your mind to a post, which is mindfulness, and do not allow it to run towards the hateful intentions immediately. And when you are mindful, you will notice those impulses arising and have some room to decide before you act. And when there is a hateful impulse, intention, ambition, goal, desire, fantasy, motivation, inclination, or however you want to call it, you simply don't follow that. You do not go through with the action that you planned. And actions are, by the way, in body, in speech, and in mind. No matter, you don't allow those impulses to bear fruit of action. Instead of welcoming, entertaining, following, or giving in, you simply do nothing. This is freakishly important. You don't want to replace it. You want to endure it and treat it with a special kind of indifference. You simply should continue acting as you normally would, as if the impulse or feeling was not there. And this requires a very tight balance and is not easy to do at all. and especially at first. But it is the only way that actually works. If you choose to replace hate with lust, don't think just about sexual lust, but any kind of desire and welcoming, then you will just strengthen your craving overall, because you increase your reliance on feeling good. That is all there really is. It is easy to say, but it is very hard to put into practice. And I think the Buddha once even called it the most difficult thing to do. But anyway, that is enough for Metta today. Let us now come to the most important points. First, modern Metta and ancient Metta are very different. While modern Metta is much better than hitting each other with sticks and stones, it will not lead to Nibbana, because it overall keeps the mechanism of craving alive. Hate can only be, countered by non-hate and not by love. And you can have a look at the Dhammapada for that. I think it is verse number 165, if I remember correctly. And combined with the right view on dependent origination, both Jhana and Metta are perfect vehicles towards Nibbana if you are, for example, full of hate or aversion towards many different kinds of things. Then you can just practice along the Brahmavihara path and end up at Nibbana. But you have to do it very thoroughly, and that is not an easy thing to do. But most people, as I see it, are more of the lustful type of person, and for them it is more jhana practice that would bear better fruit. But anyway, this is pretty much it for today. If you enjoy what I do here, feel free to like and subscribe and recommend the channel to other people. But until then, I wish you a pleasant day and goodbye.